The Dow hit a record high.
Holding steady.
The economy.
Oh, we got your back, Jack. Make a great plan, man. A real McCoy, Troy, our 3 cents for free. The options to pick, Nick. You need to discuss much. You got the key, KC, in exit strategy.
All right, Troy Harmon, Nick Antonucci, Casey Smith, we're all back. Our 3 Cents podcast is an offshoot of Money Talks Radio, and we love to talk about some exit planning strategy. As Casey always says, it's just really good business strategy, good business sense to sit around and talk about things related to value and what your next step is, and the earlier the better, right, Casey?
That's right. Can't start too early.
That's right. And if you feel like you started too late, there's no reason to hesitate there either. So if you got questions with that, you can always get in touch with us. 770-429-9166 is our number. But we wanted to talk today about valuation. It's a topic that Nick and I deal with daily. Casey hears a lot of it when he's talking to business owners. And we got to tell you, through our experience, it is not uncommon to have business owners who disagree with the valuation that you might tell them you believe, your opinion would dictate. So, Nick, you ever seen one of those?
Yeah, it seems like only every time we do evaluation.
Only every time, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, too, from the financial planning side of things, you know, because a lot of times we rely on these assumptions when we're running financial plans from business owners to, you know, they'll say their business is worth $10 million and we need to build that into our cash flow projection assumptions, and they're going to have this windfall in the future. And when you guys are doing the valuation, sometimes those things don't line up.
Yeah, there is a disconnect sometimes between what someone believes their business is worth and what it's actually worth. And a lot of times, you know, we've discussed this in previous episodes, they don't necessarily have a accurate basis for why they believe their business is worth what they believe it's worth.
Sure.
It's, you know, an overly simplistic multiple that someone else got on their business, might be in a different industry. So what we're faced with a lot of times is, you know, we present our valuation report to business owners and say, this is what we think it's worth. Meanwhile, they might have mentioned to us, we think it's worth $6.5 million, and we come back and we're like, well, it's worth $4 million. We believe it's worth $4 million.
Yeah, and that's usually after we've done all three of the asset-based, the market-based, and the income-based valuation methods. And, you know, there's no evidence at all to prove that the $6 million business in your mind is anywhere remotely close to reality. If you're going to get in the middle of a market transaction, an arm's length transaction, if you will, with another individual, they're going to do the math, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to have some sort of basis. We've also seen on the other side, Nick, where we had a situation a few years ago where an individual had basically gifted half of their business to a friend.
Yep.
And the friend turns out to be, you know, 6-10 months, a year into the deal. The friend and the gifter are no longer really as friendly as they thought they were going to be.
Yeah, it's like a marriage.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that happens. I mean, personalities, transactions, things happen, and emotion comes into the business valuation quite often, much more often than I would have ever guessed. Just being the pointy-headed finance math geek that wants to check out, you know, what something's worth. But in the middle of this particular transaction, the lady who had gifted the other individual half of her business had given her, think about this now, had given her controlling interest.
Right.
I mean, there were 50-50. There really is no control. So she gave 100%.
That's a major component of the valuation, is it not?
Huge. Sure. Controlling interest and marketability. Those are the two most common
discounts
that we run into. Mm-hmm. Most businesses do have that discount for lack of marketability in the mind of the analyst, because you know, most of the businesses that we look at are closely held. They're not public companies, so you can't quickly liquidate.
Right.
So you have to consider that. And then, you know, the other piece is control, and it can be major. But this particular individual had given away control of her business. She was the 100% owner, gave away a big chunk, wound up in a conflict, and the next thing you know, they're trying to buy the other party out.
And it was worth a lot more than she anticipated it being worth, which is, it's typically on the other side. Business owners typically overestimate what the business is worth.
Right.
And in this case, they underestimate.
It was just absolutely backwards. In fact, it was like 10 times more than she actually had wanted. She had, I mean, think about this. You give somebody something, now you're in this legal conflict and you have to buy that piece that you gave them back. So it's you're giving it to them, it feels like twice, right?
Yeah.
And not only did you give them, you know, a big chunk of a business, but now you gave them 10 times more than you anticipated.
Yeah.
And a lot of that. And this was just based on an asset-based valuation, which we always talk about is usually the lowest when it comes to nominal value. So, you know, anything can happen, but there are some ways that you can deal with the differential. And probably the easiest, Nick, is think about it like a bank, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of our, you know, sanity check that we do after our evaluations. And an easy way for a business owner to kind of understand, for example, one recently for us, there's a roughly, say, $2 million difference between what the business owner thought it was worth and what we calculated the value to be. And the easiest way was to kind of step them through this sanity check that shows whether or not the business can support enough generates enough cash flow to support the valuation they thought it was. So basically you take the business value, right?
Yeah, you assume
you put
20% down, right?
You borrow 80%, you put 20% down. And essentially, you have to be able to service that loan with the cash flow that the business is generating.
And usually business loans aren't for 30 years like a mortgage. You figure maybe a 10-year amortization.
And you can figure out, you know, the average rate on an SBA loan, in this particular case is what we did.
Right.
Small Business Administration loan. And it's easy to see relatively quickly that, you know, this valuation they thought should have been $2 million higher, the business doesn't generate enough cash to support that.
Right.
You know, if you borrowed 80% and you had to service that loan, there's little room for error.
Right. And that's really probably the quickest and easiest sanity check that you can do with a business. So, you know, you just assume whatever value is, take 80% of that, run it through an amortization calculator with a 10 or 15 year.
And really, I mean, honestly, period. To make it more realistic, you want to assume there's closing costs in the loan.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just the face value of the company. Throw in, I don't know, somewhere between 3 to 5% probably in closing costs and fees. So did
that help the business owner to kind of understand the valuation a little bit? Yeah,
what it does is it moves you a little off of the emotional side of things, where, you know, you were tied to a specific value. It's still kind of a bitter pill to swallow.
Sure.
But
you can't call someone's baby ugly.
That's right. Exactly. What we have to do is get them a mirror. Here, you check your baby out yourself.
That's right. Look at it through an objective lens.
Right. And that's the problem is human beings are a possessive animal, and everything that we have is better because we own it, right?
Yeah.
It's relatively
No one has
better.
an average business. No one has an average.
They really don't.
That's right.
Yeah, this is almost like the old what was it, Lake Wobegon? Yeah, where every child is above average.
Is above average.
Yeah. How often does that happen? I mean, just if you know anything about statistics at all, everybody's not going to be on the top side of that average,
That's
right? But it is really common to get in the middle of a transaction that was going to be the most mundane thing and have emotions flare, and it's usually about the cost, about the value, about, you know, the ultimate number.
Well, and it's interesting too, because from you guys where you sit on your perspective, the reason why someone is getting the valuation completely skews their number, what their judgment is. If someone's getting the valuation in the instance where the lady gave away half of her business, she obviously wants it
low,
wants it to be low.
Sure.
And the other side of the coin is people that want a high valuation, and their expectations are just completely skewed.
And that's where, we've talked about off the air, part of the process is we'll talk to management, the business owners, and kind of get some forecasts from them, what they expect in the future. But we also have to kind of moderate what they guide towards. You have to look at history. You might say, okay, I expect my company to grow 10% annually the next 3 years. Well, that's funny because your business is growing at 4% historically. So where do you get the 10%?
Right.
And then you can also look at industry data. A lot of times we try and moderate what the, management guides to, compare that to what his history was, and what is the industry showing? Yeah. Well, the industry is only expected to grow at 2%. So how are you going to grow at 10%? Walk me through that. And if there's a lot of, hopes and dreams built into those expectations that aren't based in reality, then we're going to pull those down, for the valuation. And that's explained. We typically provide some sort of scenario analysis that says, sure, listen, if you hit that 10% growth target, which you've never done, so you got to show us,
right?
The valuation will move upward,
right,
to X amount approximately. But if there's no history for that, it's hard to accept that as what reality may be.
Yeah, you have to kind of manage those expectations with the client, and that's why, Nick, you mentioned pretty much every valuation you guys do is off the target in one way or another.
Yeah,
based on what their expectations are.
Absolutely. I've often told Nick, if we walk away from the table and both parties are a little unsettled with our numbers, we probably got it pretty close.
Like you did a good job.
Well, also,
if somebody wants to wrestle Troy after in the parking lot,
I mean, I'll take my shirt off.
I encourage that.
Job well done.
But it goes back to what we've also said before is, in most cases, now sometimes there's a strict buy-sell that says this is the hard and fast number, whatever we come up with. But in a lot of cases that we've been involved in, it's a third-party buying where it's a jumping off point for negotiations.
Sure.
So
Well,
it's not to say that 4.5 is the value we came up with, that's what you're going to get. You could very well get more if you have a strategic buyer, someone's willing to pay a premium.
No question. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a projection, right? It's basically, at the end of the day, you're trying to forecast what you think the business is going to do over the next, 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, that could obviously change tomorrow based on whatever is going on with the company.
Yeah.
Nick mentions a buy-sell, though. And maybe this is a good topic for another episode.
Yeah, we could talk for hours about that.
I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I run into a business owner that doesn't even really know what that means.
Yeah.
Buy sell is.
I find it's really strange. About 50% of the time, they don't have a buy-sell agreement.
Yeah.
They've got partners, and they really haven't even thought about what goes on next. A buy-sell agreement should talk about things that are somewhat uncomfortable. First of all, maybe a conflict between your partners and how you come up with a value on the business. And I'll double back to that one in a second, but it should also talk about the death of a partner or the incapacitation of a partner, or, various things that are definitely uncomfortable, but that valuation should be a part of it.
Yeah. Those
that have the buy-sell agreement more often than not use an asset-based value.
Well, that's what I was going to chime in with, Troy, is just because you have a buy-sell doesn't mean it's a well-written buy-sell.
Right.
And in too many cases, as you said, it's based on the asset-based approach. And a lot of the companies we've seen it in, they're asset-light businesses where it's like
so few companies that are really that an asset-based valuation makes sense if it's a going concern.
Yeah,
right.
It's like
more often we see service businesses, and that's the biggest chunk of our economy in the U.S. Right.
Yeah.
So, when you take the assets and you subtract liabilities and you come up with a number that would be normally the equity, the old balance sheet method, which is the asset-based methodology for business valuation, it's usually a baseline. That's not normally the number that we wind up going with.
Right.
And the thing that's so out of whack to me is, Nick, what is the first thing that somebody will tell you when they're in the middle of a transaction? They always want a multiple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a multiple never comes up in a buy-sell agreement in most cases. I mean, you see them once in a while, but it's the exception, not so much the rule.
Right. I think it's important. Having a buy-sell agreement is not enough. Making sure, talk to your attorney about the nature of your business and ensure that it's written in a way that makes sense for your business specifically.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if you're an asset light business, having an asset based approach as the method that deems the value is probably not going to give you an accurate value. Now, if you're the one buying, I'm sure it'll work in your favor.
Sure.
If you're buying the shares, but if you're looking to sell, it's likely going to undervalue what your shares should be
and
worth.
when you write a buy-sell agreement, who knows who's going to be on which side of the
You don't
agreement?
know,
You
right.
want to make sure that everybody's
Protect
going to be
everybody, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's about protecting really the ongoing business concern, because even if you're exiting the business, it's still in your best interest for that business to do well, because what is the source of cash flow that's going to pay you out?
Right.
I mean, the thing is making sure that the business is well and does well in the future is almost always at the benefit of both parties. So, I think it's best to think of these things ahead of time, and unfortunately, we don't get near enough of that.
Yeah.
But it has always kind of blown me away that there is so much emotion when it comes to business valuation. But hey, you know what? It's a fact of life. It's the way things go. But guys, you got anything else? We'll wrap up.
No.
Sounds good. Thanks for listening to Our 3 Cents.
You just need to commence, gents. Make a great plan, man. A real McCoy and Troy. Our 3 cents for free.
All material presented is from sources believed to be reliable and current, but accuracy cannot be guaranteed. The contents are intended for general information purposes only. Information provided should not be the sole basis in making any decision and is not intended to replace the advice of qualified professionals, such as tax consultants, insurance advisor, or attorney. Although this material is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with respect to the subject matter, it may not apply in all situations. This is not to be construed as an offer to buy or sell any financial instruments. It is not our intention to state, indicate, or imply in any manner that current or past results are indicative of future profitability or expectations. Portfolio holdings discussed are subject to change. There is no guarantee that in the future these securities will be held in the Hensler accounts. As with all investments, there are associated inherent risks. Please obtain and review all financial material carefully before investing. Hensler is not licensed to offer or sell insurance products. This overview is not to be construed as an offer to purchase any insurance products.